Beneath the glass ceiling. Word count. 3,537. The moment I stepped into the conference room that Monday morning, I sensed it. That prickle at the base of my neck. The subtle shift in the air. Something was off. There was a hum of tension beneath the surface of cheerful greetings and overly casual banter. I adjusted my blazer, blinking away the exhaustion in my eyes, and forced a polite smile as I took my usual seat near the back of the long mahogany table. My name is Elena Morales. I'd worked at Redline Dynamics, a slick, tech-based consulting firm, for 6 years. 6 long, grueling years spent clawing my way up the corporate ladder, dodging toxic office politics, and silently enduring the soul-crushing atmosphere that this company thrived upon. Despite my work ethic and above-average performance, I remained overlooked, underpaid, and underappreciated, a cog in the machine. But I had dreams, I had plans for my future. For something bigger. I just needed to survive a little longer. I glanced toward the head of the table where the man responsible for most of my misery sat. Maxwell Kincaid, CEO, charismatic, ruthless, tall enough to cast a long shadow, both literally and figuratively. Maxwell had a reputation that preceded him. The brilliant entrepreneur who turned Redline into a multi-million-dollar powerhouse. And behind closed doors, he was a shark. Beneath his polished exterior was a man who thrived on manipulation, deceit, and crushing those who dared challenge him. But today, his thunderstorm eyes barely flicked toward me. That was unusual. Maxwell had a habit of needling me during meetings, playing his games of power and control, subtly undermining my contributions. Yet now, his attention wasn't on me. It was on the stack of papers clutched in his hand. His jaw was tight, his movements stiff. "What's going on?" whispered Naomi, my closest, possibly my only, friend here, as she slid into the chair beside me. Her auburn hair was pulled into a flawless bun. Her lips painted a sharp crimson. Naomi worked in marketing, while I managed operations. 2 different worlds. But we'd bonded over shared grievances about Maxwell and his cronies. Without her, I probably would have snapped years ago. "I don't know," I murmured back, leaning toward her. "He seems tense." As if on cue, Maxwell slammed the stack of papers onto the table, the sound reverberating like a gunshot. Conversations ceased. All heads turned toward him. "Good morning," he said, voice icy. "I hope everyone's weekend was productive. Because we've got plenty to cover. And we're not wasting time." His gaze swept across the room like a blade cutting through silence. It landed on me for a fraction of a second, and I swore I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something like suspicion. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual cold arrogance. The meeting began, and I drifted into autopilot, scribbling notes and answering questions when prompted. Maxwell's tension didn't ease, though. If anything, it deepened with every passing minute. Beneath the surface of my calm composure, my mind raced, because I knew what Maxwell didn't. The secret I'd uncovered could ruin him. 6 weeks earlier, I'd stayed late one Friday evening, finishing up project notes for an upcoming presentation. The office was mostly empty, save for a few interns and cleaning staff. I liked the quiet. No Maxwell, no distractions, just me and my spreadsheets. As the clock ticked toward 9, I stood, stretching my stiff limbs, and made my way toward the break room for coffee. That was when I heard it. A muffled voice carrying from Maxwell's office. His distinctive baritone, sharp and commanding. I froze, glancing at the hallway. His door was slightly ajar. Maxwell didn't typically stay late, and when he did, he was careful about maintaining his privacy. I should have kept walking. I should have minded my own business, gotten my coffee, and left. But the curiosity burned too hot. Quietly, I approached his office and peeked inside. Maxwell wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize sat across from him, a briefcase resting by his chair. The tension between them was palpable, their body language stiff and guarded. "It's taken care of," Maxwell said with a tight smile, his voice low but firm. "Your money's been transferred. I expect discretion on your end." The man adjusted his tie, looking unconvinced. "And the audits? If the regulators catch wind of this?" Quote, "They won't." Maxwell leaned forward, his tone growing darker. "We've erased the trail. Every detail has been managed. Trust me, our books will pass inspection." I strained to hear more, but my heart was already pounding. Something about the conversation struck me as deeply wrong. Maxwell's schemes and manipulations were well known to everyone at Redline. But this sounded bigger, more dangerous. I swallowed hard, backing away before I could be spotted. Over the next week, I couldn't shake my unease. Maxwell's cryptic words echoed in my mind. "Trust me, our books will pass inspection." What could he possibly mean? And what trail had needed erasing? That was when I decided to investigate. The memory of that night, and the weeks that followed, is burned into my mind. To say my discovery was catastrophic would be an understatement. Maxwell wasn't just pushing ethical boundaries. He was committing fraud. Millions of dollars, funneled through shell companies, fake invoices, and shady contractors to line his own pockets. And the worst part? Redline's board of directors was either complicit or completely blind to it. My initial horror quickly morphed into rage. Maxwell had carefully cultivated an image of success, flashing his wealth and power like a badge of honor. Meanwhile, employees like me were working overtime for laughable pay, getting passed over for promotions because we didn't fit his vision. I couldn't let him get away with it. I wouldn't let him. The meeting dragged on, with Maxwell's mood growing darker by the minute. Once it finally ended, I gathered my laptop and notebooks, preparing to leave. Naomi caught my arm as we exited the conference room. "Something's happening," she said under her breath, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Have you noticed how he's been? Tense, paranoid. He's snapping at everyone." I hesitated before replying, unsure how much to reveal. Naomi was trustworthy, but what I'd uncovered was dangerous. If Maxwell suspected me, I don't know, I lied, forcing a shrug. "It's probably just stress." She frowned, unconvinced, but didn't press further. Together, we made our way toward the elevators, the hum of office chatter surrounding us. As I reached the parking garage, my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Email notification from an investigative journalist I'd been corresponding with. Heart pounding. I stepped aside, leaning against the concrete wall, and opened the message. My eyes scanned the text, absorbing every word. Elena, thank you for sending over the documents. I've reviewed everything carefully. And you're absolutely right. There's enough evidence here to launch a full investigation. If what you've uncovered is accurate, the fallout for Redline Dynamics could be enormous. I've contacted the relevant authorities and will begin drafting the article immediately. Expect publication early next week. Let me know if you have any additional details or concerns. M. Carter. I exhaled shakily, staring at the screen in a dazed mixture of relief and fear. It was happening. Maxwell's empire was about to crumble, and I was the one holding the match. A quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered warnings. What if this backfires? What if he finds out it was me? But the louder voice, the one fueled by years of frustration and betrayal, screamed louder. Maxwell deserved this. He deserved every ounce of humiliation, every ruined partnership, every loss of reputation. He had played dirty for too long. Now it was his turn to lose. When the article dropped 4 days later, the fallout was immediate. I sat in my cubicle that morning, pretending to work, while chaos erupted across the office. Phones rang non-stop. Emails flooded inboxes. Employees whispered in frantic clusters, their faces pale and anxious. The headline blazed across screens. CEO of Redline Dynamics accused of fraud. Millions missing in financial scandal. I kept my expression neutral, even as satisfaction simmered deep inside me. The article spared no details. Maxwell's fraudulent schemes were laid bare for the world to see, supported by documents, spreadsheets, and insider testimony sourced anonymously. It wasn't long before regulators descended upon Redline's headquarters like vultures circling a carcass. Maxwell stormed through the office midday, his face livid, his voice sharp and cutting. He barked orders, demanding damage control and threatening anyone who didn't comply. But no amount of shouting could reverse the damage. His empire was sinking, and he knew it. I half expected him to confront me, to accuse me outright, but the evidence was airtight, the trail untraceable. I was careful to hide my involvement, ensuring no one could connect the dots. Still, every glance he sent my way felt heavier, more suspicious. By the end of the week, he was gone, resigned, forced out by Redline's board in a desperate attempt to salvage their reputation. But it was too late. Lawsuits flooded in, clients abandoned ship, employees scrambled for exits, desperate to escape the growing dumpster fire. As I packed up my desk the following Monday, Naomi approached me, her expression grim. "This place is dead," she said bluntly. "There's no saving it now." I nodded, unable to suppress the bittersweet smile tugging at my lips. "Maybe that's for the best." Her brows furrowed as she studied me. "Did you quote?" The question hung in the air, unfinished. I met her gaze steadily. "Let's just say Maxwell got what he deserved." Naomi's lips curved into the faintest smirk. She didn't press further. Weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, coffee in hand, staring out at the city skyline. Redline had officially declared bankruptcy, an announcement that prompted both cheers and gasps from the industry. Maxwell faced criminal charges. Justice was being served. And me? For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the chains of toxic work environments. Free from the suffocating weight of unfair expectations. Free to pursue a future that belonged entirely to me. I hadn't just survived Maxwell's reign of terror. I had ended it, and in doing so, I'd reclaimed a little piece of my soul. My coffee had grown cold, but I didn't mind. The view from the balcony was breathtaking. High rises stretching toward the clouds, their sharp edges softened by the early morning haze. The city had always felt alive to me, but today it was more vibrant than ever, as if reflecting the new sense of freedom I carried within myself. For years, I'd lived in the shadow of Redline Dynamics, tethered to its toxicity, suffocated by its relentless demands. Now, for the first time in ages, I could breathe. I leaned against the railing, letting the brisk wind play with my hair. But as much as I wanted to enjoy the moment, my thoughts kept circling back to Maxwell. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge, though that had been deeply satisfying. It was about justice, about holding him accountable, something no one had dared to do before. And yet, part of me couldn't stop replaying those final days. The fallout, the glimpses of his crumbling facade. I hadn't stuck around long after the article dropped. Truthfully, while I felt pride in what I had accomplished, I also felt afraid. Afraid of being caught, of facing retribution, of the unpredictable chaos that followed Maxwell's exposure. But before I left, there had been one moment I would never forget. It had been late in the afternoon, the day Maxwell was officially removed from his position. The office was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the usual cacophony of ringing phones, humming printers, and hurried conversations. As I packed the last of my belongings into a worn cardboard box, I heard footsteps approaching. Elena. I stiffened at the sound of his voice. Maxwell. Slowly, I turned to face him. He stood a few feet away, his once pristine suit rumpled, his tie loosened as if it had been choking him all day. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked human, vulnerable. Gone was the commanding presence, the untouchable arrogance. In its place was a man who had been stripped of everything. "You're leaving," he said, his tone flat, devoid of emotion. "Yes." He nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping over the box in my hands. I could tell he wanted to say more, but words seemed to elude him. For a moment, the silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then his eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it, a flicker of recognition. "You knew, didn't you?" he said quietly. My heart skipped a beat. I kept my expression neutral, my voice steady. "Knew what?" Quote. His lips twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You were always smarter than the others. Smarter than you let on." "I did my job," I replied evenly. "Your job?" He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "You did more than your job, Elena. You knew what was happening, but you never said a word. Not to me, not to anyone. You just watched. And now," he spread his arms wide, gesturing at the empty office, the shattered remnants of his empire. "Now this." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of breaking. "Maybe you should take responsibility for your actions, Maxwell," I said coldly. "You did this to yourself." His jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, his usual fire flared, but it died just as quickly, replaced by a hollow sadness. "You have no idea how hard I worked for this company," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How much I sacrificed." Quote. "Sacrificed?" I repeated, incredulous. "You didn't sacrifice anything, Maxwell. You stole. You lied. You manipulated people for your own gain. And you think that gives you the right to mourn what you've lost." Quote. He stepped closer, his presence still intimidating despite his disheveled appearance. "You think you're better than me?" he asked, his voice sharp. "No," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "But I am free of you. And that's enough." For the first time, Maxwell faltered. He took a step back, his shoulders slumping as the weight of the truth seemed to hit him. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the office that had once felt like a prison. Back on my balcony, the memory still lingered, bittersweet. Maxwell had deserved everything that happened to him. Every lawsuit, every public humiliation, every loss of power. And yet, there was a small part of me that couldn't help but pity him. Perhaps that was what truly separated us. The ability to feel remorse when the damage was done. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first joined Redline Dynamics. I had learned to harden myself, to push through obstacles, to defy expectations. But as much as the experience had shaped me, I was ready to leave it all behind. My future wasn't in the ruins of Redline. It was waiting somewhere else. Somewhere brighter. My phone buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, a smile tugging at my lips. Naomi's name flashed across the display. "Naomi, coffee tomorrow? You owe me details." Despite the chaos at Redline, Naomi had managed to stay afloat, securing a position at another firm before the company imploded completely. She had suspected my involvement in Maxwell's downfall, but she never pried, content to let me reveal the truth in my own time. I typed a quick reply. "Elena, absolutely. My treat." As I set my phone down, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. What Maxwell never understood, what people like him never seemed to understand, was that power didn't insulate you forever. Eventually, the lies catch up, the greed swallows you whole, and the people you've hurt find their strength to fight back. I had found mine. The coffee shop the next morning was bustling, the aroma of fresh pastries and roasted beans filling the air. I arrived early, finding a table near the window and ordering a latte while I waited for Naomi. The sunlight streaming through the glass seemed to warm me from the inside out, a welcome contrast to the cold tension that had permeated my days at Redline. When Naomi walked in, her hair was loose for once, cascading over her shoulders, and her confident stride drew a few admiring glances from other patrons. She spotted me immediately and grinned, making her way over with her usual air of purpose. Finally, she said as she dropped into the seat across from me, "I've been dying to hear everything." I chuckled, sipping my latte. "You always were impatient. Don't start with me, Morales." She leaned forward, resting her elbow on the table. "So, are you going to tell me what really happened? Or do I have to guess?" I hesitated, weighing my options. Naomi had earned my trust, but sharing the full story felt daunting. Still, I owed her the truth, or at least part of it. "I found something," I began carefully. "Something Maxwell was hiding, and I made sure the right people saw it." Her eyes widened, and she lowered her voice. "You mean the article? You were behind it?" I nodded. "I couldn't let him get away with it, Naomi. Not after everything he did, everything he stood for. It wasn't just about me. It was about justice, about doing the right thing." She leaned back in her chair, staring at me for a long moment before letting out a low whistle. "I knew you were bold, but damn, that's next level, Elena. I'm proud of you." Her words hit me harder than I expected, a wave of gratitude washing over me. For so long, I had doubted myself, wondering if I was strong enough to do what needed to be done. Hearing her validation meant more than she would ever know. "Thanks," I said quietly. She smiled, lifting her coffee in a mock toast. "Here's to new beginnings. And to Maxwell never showing his face in the industry again." I laughed, clinking my cup against hers. "I'll drink to that." As the days turned into weeks, I found myself growing more confident, more sure of who I was and what I wanted. Maxwell's downfall had marked the end of one chapter, but it wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. No matter where life took me next, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer a victim of circumstance. I was the author of my own story, and I intended to write it well.